So this is what we're making. An anticlastic pearl pendant, no soldering. So I'm using a strip of metal 3 millimeters wide, 0.7 of a millimeter thick. And this is fine silver. If you have a piece of silver and you don't know what it is, anneal it. When you're finished annealing, if it's a dark gray, it's sterling. If it's silver, it's fine silver. Fine silver won't blacken like the sterling does. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a hammered finish on this, and I'm just going to use an embossing hammer, and you could use the round end of your planishing hammer. You could use a ball peen hammer. You could use a real embossing hammer, and this is Damascus steel. Pretty. But I think I'll use the little bit larger ball on my chasing hammer. So I'm just going to do this on my lap. Piece of timber, bench block, and I'm just going to gently hammer this from one end to the other. And you just watch as you hammer, and you can see if you've missed a spot, go back and hammer it. So, from one end to the other. Now, when I started with this strip of material, I didn't sand the edge because I knew that when I was hammering, it was going to bulge the edge out like this with the little hammer marks, and those don't need to be sanded. They're fine on their own. Now this is the end that's going to be on the inside, and I'm going to use my hole punch. You could drill, but in about 2 millimeters, I'm going to just punch a hole. And then I'm going to lightly file the corners, because this is just square at the moment. So just slightly round it, just for a little bit nicer aesthetics. And then I'm sanding those spots with 400 grade sandpaper on a sanding stick. Now, because this is hammered, it's work hardened, so I need to anneal it again to be able to put my anticlastic spiral in it. So I'm just going to heat this until it's a dull red. I'm using my Smith's little torch. You can use any torch, it doesn't really matter. And you do have to move the flame off the material to be able to see the color. Fine silver doesn't show the red the way sterling does. But you can just check it, and if it's easily bent and it stays bent, it's annealed. And if you have a little curve like this, it's quite easy to take it out with just your fingers. So dry the metal off and we'll form it. So I'm going to use this Bonnie Doon forming stake because I'm going to use the Bonnie Doon hammer, which is urethane. And by using the urethane deforms, and it will actually form around this curve so that it will make a nice smooth curve in our metal, and it won't damage the pattern. And this is a Bonnie Doon vise, a horizontal vise. You don't have to have one of these. It's just I have one, and it's nice because the way it holds these horizontal. You can just put this in a regular vise. That's fine. So I'm going to move up so you can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm going to hold the metal above the groove so that as I'm using the tapered part of the hammer, it's going to make it anticlastic shape, and it's going to form it around and curved at the same time. So this is the diameter that I want, because this is going to be a pendant. So you can see, as little as this is, it's curving it up and around at the same time. Now, I think I'm going to go a little bit smaller one. So this is getting to be the shape I want. So I'm just going to keep working until this comes all the way around into here, and then I'll cut this to length and make a bail. Now, this is the way the pieces come out. So as you hammer, it gets tighter on the outside and a little bigger on what's going to be the inside. So I just annealed it again, and I'm just going to put it over the piece and just push it around, because it won't change my anticlastic shape, and it will be the shape I want. So then I'll just pull it off. Open it up a little. And that's what I want. So now I'll make my bail on this end and hallmark it, and we'll be ready to put a pearl in. So there's the hole for my pearl, and I want the bail to be up here so that the pearl will hang straight down. So I'm just going to put my thumb above the hole. I'm going to measure 20 millimeters. And cut that off with my shears. And I'm just going to hold this in my fingers, lightly file the corners, use my sanding stick, lightly sand the end and the corners, don't sand this bit down here. And I'm just going to open it up a little so I can hallmark it. Then I'm just going to use my flat round pliers, and I'm going to put the bail this way. So I'm just going to turn the bail until it touches, and then turn it 90 degrees. Check to make sure it still touches. Now, what you can do is go back on your round mandrel and just push this around so that it's got a nice smooth curve. So that's my shape with my bail. That's basically finished. So now we want to do a pearl peg, and I'm just going to use a piece of 0.8 millimeter square sterling. I'm going to melt a ball on the end, so basically I'm making a head pin. So we'll just hold this vertically. And you can use any one of your torches for this. All you're going to do is bring the flame on the bottom at about a 45-degree angle. The end will melt, the ball will start to travel up. Stop before it gets too big, otherwise it'll drop off. Quench it. Cut about a 10 millimeter long piece off. You just cut it with your side cutters. Grab the two ends with your parallel jaw pliers. Now don't grab your ball too tightly or you'll put flats on it. And we just want to put a bit of a twist in the wire, and that's just to hold the glue. Pickle this. You don't need to polish it, but if you pickle it, it'll make it silver rather than black. So make a bead cap for your pearl. This is a 10 millimeter pearl, and I made a 9.5 disc and just domed it once. So check that it fits the curve of your pearl. We don't want it to look like a beanie, we just want it to look like a cap. So now we're going to put a hole in this, and we just use our centering punch. And I'm just going to use a 1 millimeter drill bit. To drill out the hole. And we'll rub the edges on 400 grade sandpaper just to make sure they're nice and smooth. Check to see that you can see the dull finish all the way around. We don't want a sharp edge. And now we'll just check that our head pin is silver, and if it is, what I'll do is polish these two bits by putting them in the tumbler, and then once that's shiny, we'll glue it. So basically we're ready to glue. So when I'm polishing something like this, I wire the two pieces together so that I can find them easily once it's finished polishing. Because if you have something like a bead cap in there on its own, good luck finding the bloody thing when you're done. So these will go in the tumbler for about half an hour. It'll work harden the metal and make it shiny, and then we're ready to rock and roll. So this bit's out of the tumbler, nice and shiny, and it's actually work hardened it a bit, so it has tension now rather than just being soft. Our bead cap, nice and shiny, and our head pin is out of the pickle and it's nice and silvery color. And check the fit at this time, because it's easier to do it out here than it is once it's in there. So we'll just drop that down through the hole. Put our bead cap on. Slip the bead on. And what we do is run the cap all the way up against the silver. Leave the bead down here. We'll reach in, put our glue, and we use 5-minute epoxy. We'll put our glue on the wire, the twisted wire, and that way it'll be inside the cap. So I'll just set that here. So we'll mix up an equal amount of the two parts. And I always use a cocktail toothpick because they're cheap, and once the glue is in place and I've used what I want to use, then I leave the toothpick sitting in the glue so that I can check it and not check the jewelry piece, because if you twist the pearl, you'll damage the glue. And it'll break the tension. So once your glue's on the wire, push your pearl into place. And I hold the end of the wire, pull the pearl down tight, and then I hang the pearl on the third hand, holding it by here, and that way the pearl and the cap and everything will be down against the piece. And then once the glue's dry, I just clip the wire off close to the pearl, and then I'll file the pearl peg. I'll file flush with the pearl. Now you could use a half-drilled pearl. I'm using a fully drilled pearl just because I have one. And that will be it. So we check, make sure our glue is well set. And that means we can take it off our third hand to trim this. So we could use the side cutters, but we can also use our saw. Now, whatever you do, don't use sandpaper on any of this. And this is a little barrette file, 2O, and you can just hold the pearl in your fingers, pass that over the end. And that's it, it's finished. So, that's what it looks like. Now, when you're making this, you could solder the bail, but I didn't. I wanted to make a piece that was no soldering. So that's our pearl pendant, anticlastic pearl pendant.